that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. So lovely earth can stay lovely still.
Hello everybody, this is Energy Week with George Harvey and the famous Tom Fennell.
In the flesh.
In the flesh. He says that every week.
I'm here in the flesh every week.
That's right. And every week I explain the story. You know, I've been thinking about Gilligan's Island.
Yeah.
They explain how everybody got there in the song. That's why they wrote the song, so they wouldn't have to. And I've been thinking maybe I should write a song that explains Energy Week. But anyway, every day I get up early and I go to the internet and I look for 10 or 15 news items that look new. And I post somewhere between 10 and 15 of them every day to the blog, which is geoharvey.com. And those people who are listening to the show can go to geoharvey.com. We will try to keep you apprised of the dates for the news that we're talking about. And by clicking on those dates on the calendar at geoharvey.com, you can actually find the link to the news item that we're talking about among the 10 or 15 that are there.
Well, as I usually say, some of these news items are really quite interesting.
Some of them, we've got one this week that is probably the most fascinating or mind-boggling.
There's a couple of them really interesting.
There's a couple that are interesting, but
I
one
like
of them.
The one with the choo-choo trains.
Yeah, I know. I knew you'd like that, but
You'll see it, guys. You'll see it. It's coming up.
The second to the last one is, whoa! How did this happen?
The one with the bugs.
With the bugs, that's right.
Oh boy,
man.
You know, that is really impressive.
That's really impressive, and it's hard to imagine what that's going to turn into.
Well,
Nevertheless,
as I was about to say, you know, we can't talk about. We could probably devote the whole show to that last one.
Yeah, we could. Yeah,
but,
we could.
We don't have time. So.
We could build an entire show around that one news item. Okay.
So look it up, guys.
Look it up. But wait till we get there, so you'll know what we're talking about. Anyway,
Let's start with an image here.
Yeah, we're starting on August 17th.
Where's this image coming up? We got to get this image.
Sorry. There it is.
There we go.
There's the image. We're starting with August 17th with an item that came from MTPR,
Whatever that means.
I'm sure it's Montana Public Radio.
Public Radio, it is. Yes.
Yeah.
Montana governor says ignoring climate change is short-sighted and dangerous.
The governor of Montana is worried about climate change. The eastern half of Montana is now in the most severe drought in the nation. July farm losses are nearly $400 million more than last year's, according to figures from the U.S. Forest Service. And the state's wildlife season is costing Montanans more than $1 million a day.
Two quick takeaways.
Yeah.
Here. Fire seasons in Montana are nearly 3 months longer than they were 2 decades ago.
Wow.
Wow, huh?
Oh,
it may be a vision of Montana.
Climate isn't changing, of course.
No. And the second one, and follows on the first, there is growing evidence that these events are associated with increased warming and climate change.
You know, there's some very interesting information that's available, and we don't have it here, so I can't cite it, but people who want to find out can find the scientific research that's being done in how you blame parts of the things that are going wrong in nature on climate change, and what you can blame and how much of it. So if you have a drought that costs $400 million, it's possible for scientists to say, well, we can probably say that this would have been a $200 million drought except for climate change. And the science that they use behind that, it's really
all backed up.
Yeah, it's all backed up. It's not a guess. It's really impressive. And I think a person...
It's a hoax.
Yeah. The drought in Montana is actually a Chinese hoax.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. Should we move on?
Well, we are, and this one, unfortunately, I couldn't pull up, and I tried.
Really? Okay.
This is from the press release Rocket.
Yeah, well, the press release Rocket turned out to be a dud, I guess.
The site you were looking for couldn't be found.
Maybe it went dead.
I don't know.
I test these things.
Article too.
I test these things using a different source. What I do is I use what's called an incognito window.
Okay.
On my machine. I'm using Google Chrome for a lot of these searches. And they provide an incognito window. Well, the computer, seeing the request for the site come in, doesn't know that it's the same, that it has gone through a site that requested this through Google. So the result of that is that if it has a paywall, it'll block it.
Okay.
You see, and that's why my stuff has been better than it had been in the past. But this one, I guess, it just didn't work. Most Europeans can choose who they buy their power from and can choose to purchase power from renewable power plants instead of accepting a, quote, gray default, end quote,
that's
power.
novel, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. More and more consumers prefer to buy clean power from solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, or bio. Growth in demand for renewable power stands at 39% this year. And you know, that can be done in a lot of states in the United States.
Well, they're doing it down in Greenfield.
They sure are.
And it's something that's spreading. The idea is spreading.
Yes, it is.
But every state has different laws, so it can't be done everywhere.
That's right. Can't be done in Vermont as yet. But you know, who knows what sorts of things are going to happen.
Well, we got another picture coming up.
We have a picture.
This is very interesting.
This is an interesting picture.
And
this came from Clean Technica.
What is that we're looking at, huh?
Yeah, what is it?
Boeri-designed vertical forests are helping Milan to breathe.
In Milan, architect Stefano Boeri created 2 high-rise apartment blocks that are adorned with a massive number of trees and plants, including 800 trees and 16,000 other plants. Combined,
those are apartment houses.
Those are apartment houses.
Yeah.
Combined,
Nice.
the 2 towers can convert about 44,000 pounds of carbon dioxide into oxygen annually. They also filter dust from the air. And you know,
This is a win-win situation.
Oh yeah, it
I'd
is.
love to live in a place
Yeah,
like that.
I would too. Absolutely. Just imagine having a
forest in your
an apartment on one of the upper floors of this thing and having trees on your balcony and a view.
Yeah.
You know.
A couple of quick takeaways here. The buildings were completed in 2014.
Okay.
Cost only 5% more to construct than a traditional apartment house.
Yeah.
Okay, so they weren't all that expensive. You have to buy the apartments, and they're in demand. $725,000 for an apartment on one of the lower levels. $2.25 million now, not euros, for a penthouse apartment.
Wow.
And to maintain these plants, I was wondering how that happened. They got a crew of aerial arborists who traverse the towers to check and care for them. So they got it all figured out.
Aerial arborists.
Yeah.
Let's just consider what that might imply. I guess it's no worse than a window washer on a lot of buildings.
It's a kind of a high-falutin window washer.
Yeah, right. Okay.
A window washer with green overalls.
The stuff that we've been dealing with is August 17th. I might have forgotten to mention that.
It's a new day.
The next day we're coming to is Friday the 18th of August, and we've got an item from the Japan Times.
July's global land temperatures, that's worldwide, were the hottest ever recorded.
Amazing. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration reported that July was the second hottest month since record-keeping began in 1880 at 61.89 degrees Fahrenheit. Last month, it was behind July 2016 all-time record by just 9/100ths of a degree.
Now, this doesn't sound that hot, but this is the global temperature.
Yeah,
It includes the Arctic and the Antarctic.
Yeah, and New England, which was
oceans.
cool, actually. And the land temperatures in July were the hottest on record at 59.96 degrees Fahrenheit.
Well, last time this happened, they were able to blame it on El Nino, but there's no El Nino.
There's no El Nino. That's why it's so kind of mind-boggling. Everybody expected that it was going to be cooler, but it wasn't.
It isn't.
Yeah.
How strange.
How strange, indeed. Okay, should we move on?
Yeah, let's move on.
That was from The Guardian, by the way. Our next one is from Clean Technica. And we have
Wait a second. The last one was from the Japan Times.
I'm sorry. The next
Yeah.
one is from
This
the
one's from
Guardian,
the
and I've
Guardian.
already switched to the new picture. But let's just leave it there.
Climate change will likely wreck their livelihoods, but they still don't buy the science.
Oh my gosh!
This is a long and interesting article.
It
It's
is
about
a long.
Louisiana.
It's got a lot of pictures of people and what they're doing, and there's a lot of water there. In 50 years, Cameron Parish, Louisiana, will likely not exist anymore, according to a newly published calculations from the Louisiana government, which of course does claim to believe in climate change, even though Donald Trump would prefer that it not.
That it didn't.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe they listen to the Chinese. Cameron Parish has the greatest percentage of Trump supporters of any county in the United States, and they just don't believe there's a problem.
Well, this is a quote from one of them. "I don't believe it," he says, shaking his head. "I don't believe the tide is going to rise 10 feet and that the ice age is coming and stuff like that. If you go by what the real scientists say, there's no proof. How much money has Al Gore made out of global warming?" So now they're blaming Al Gore for it.
Okay.
And there's a back article here.
Yes.
The real reason behind all of this is oil. This is the southwestern corner
Right.
of Louisiana. It's near Houston, Texas. It's
Yep.
oil country.
There's offshore oil rigs.
And there's a lot of oil, and there's a lot of fishing for shrimp.
And you know, Al Gore said, I wish I could quote him, but he was quoting somebody else, and this was a long time ago I heard it, but he said it's really hard to convince somebody that something is true if his livelihood depends upon his believing that
I've
it's
heard
not
the
true.
statement. I don't think it was original with Gore.
No,
but
it was
it's
not.
It's a valid statement.
It absolutely is. And these people are, associated with the
This is their livelihood.
fossil fuels industry. They just don't want to believe it. They want to think that they can, that they will keep their jobs.
But the article, if you look at it from a distance, the article is really kind of funny.
Yes, it is. It's
Some of these people
kind of
are
funny.
absurd.
Well, you know what it reminds me of is, it's like a group of people go out for a picnic and somebody says, well, I don't want to be in a place where there's all sorts of grass. I mean, there's ants in the grass. Could we be on a place that's like a stone or something? So they find this black level surface and they say, this would be a good place to have a picnic. And somebody sits down, they all sit down, and somebody says, well, wait a minute, what are these iron bars? And somebody else says, well, those are railroad tracks. We're on a railroad crossing. And somebody says, I know that barn over there. I've ridden on the track on the train that goes on it's an express train. And somebody says, well, there's an express train just down the track. And somebody else says, well, it's got to be at least a mile away. And then somebody else says, yeah, and those trains are going 90 miles an hour, and it'll probably be here in 40 seconds. And somebody else says, nah, they'll stop. They'll see us. They'll stop. We got here first. And of course, an express train going that fast cannot stop in a mile. Huh?
Not that he would want to.
Well, I think he'd stop for people on the track if he could see them. But I mean, we're in the middle of a mind-bogglingly insane denial.
Well, with some people, it's an article of faith.
It's an article of faith, exactly.
Well, let's
Okay.
move along here. This is an interesting article coming up. We got an image.
We do, and it's up.
Let's see if
You
I
can
get
put it
the
up.
image.
This is the one I was talking about.
This
That's
is
at
a
Clean
very
Technica.
interesting little thing here.
Yeah, it is.
It's not a playhouse.
Not a playhouse. It's not a vendor's thing on a beach or something like that. This is
Well, it says off-grid box, doesn't it?
It sure does.
Well, let's find out what it is.
Okay.
This containerized solution brings clean water and solar power to remote areas.
Getting electricity and clean water to remote villages can make a huge difference to those who live there. Running power and water lines from a central location can be expensive, but water filtration systems and electricity generation can be provided to remote locations at low cost. An Italian startup has a $15,000 all-in-one modular solution. So that,
Well, the operative word there is modular.
yeah,
I mean, these things, bring them in on a truck. Put
that's
them
right.
down.
Put them down.
2 hours later, everybody in the village has power.
Yeah. And
where they never had it before.
yeah, and it deals with both electricity and water. And you know, we're dealing with a lot of people here whose power demands are really extremely limited. You know, I
Absolutely.
remember reading some woman said,
a light bulb in the kitchen
and a
they only
fan
have one
maybe.
room anyhow.
Yeah, and a fan
And a television set.
and a television set, which is going to be. They need to charge their cell phones.
Well, that picture there is the deluxe model,
Deluxe.
and it's got hot water added,
Yep.
solar hot water, and it got a couple of turbines attached.
Yes.
The normal box comes without those little extras, but they're extras. And I'll tell you what's in it, because it's everything you need. There's a solar panel array and a roof. There's an integrated inverter, because solar panels need inverters. There's a battery pack. There's a water collection system. There's a water storage tank. And there's a water treatment system. So
There you
all of
go.
a sudden they got power and water where they never had anything like that before.
Right. Did I ever tell you, Tom, about my brother's invention of a filter?
I'll stop if you did.
Well, he invented a filter and he's got international patents on this. He invented a filter that will filter water, and the filter can be made by any village potter anywhere in the world. And you know, following instructions. It's
Yeah.
a little bit odd
Yeah.
because you have to mix certain things in.
So it's a ceramic filter?
It's a ceramic filter, and it has sawdust or something like that mixed in with it. Dust,
Yeah,
in any
some
event,
sort of dust.
an organic dust. So it fires, and it's porous. It won't hold water. The
Okay,
water
the
will
water
go
goes
through
right
it
through it, yeah.
slowly, and after it's fired, what he did was you paint it with silver nitrate, and you fire it again. And this is a very small amount of silver that's going onto this, but the silver is extremely toxic to bacteria and viruses. And he
there
took
are
that,
remedies on the net that talk about
Yeah.
silver, yeah.
and he took one of these things to Bangladesh, and the government of Bangladesh tested it by putting water from the Ganges River into it. Ganges River is one of the most polluted in the world. It might be the most polluted.
And everybody bathes in it every day.
Yeah, and they tested the water that came out, and the bacteria count was 0.
How about that? So is
Very
he
effective.
marketing this thing? Or?
Yeah, slowly. It's the problem that he's got is this is a patent that can be infringed by any village potter. So how do you defend that? Answer:
Not very easy.
not very easily.
So let's see what's happening on Saturday, August 19th.
Okay, are we really that far forward? I thought we
Unless
had
we skipped
something
a
from
couple of days,
solar industry, wind and sun.
This is from Clean Technical.
What date?
Saturday.
Oh, I jumped forward. Okay, from Clean Technica.
European vehicle-to-grid plan pays off for electric car owners and extends battery life.
In a European test of vehicle-to-grid technology involving 100 vehicles, the owners of electric Nissans earned an average of $1,530 a year from the program, more than the cost of charging the vehicles. The test also showed that vehicle-to-grid schemes may actually slow the rate at which lithium-ion batteries degrade in normal use.
So these are batteries in cars that are connected to the grid.
Right.
And they're being used by the utility as storage.
As storage.
And they pay the owner of the
They
car.
pay for the storage. And of course what's happening is when electric when the spot prices of electric power are low, they can go below 0, which
Then
means
they
they
buy
can
it.
charge that
Yeah.
battery and make money doing it by
Right.
charging the owner nothing.
Right.
And then when the price of grid power, the spot price goes high,
They sell it back to the utility.
yeah, and
Thank God
these
how the money rolls in.
right. Well, anyway, that's that.
There's some complications with this. It has
There's
to do
always
with
complications.
really the connection technology.
Yeah,
But they'll resolve
they'll
that.
get it straightened out. Okay,
Okay, the
our
one
next
here.
item is from PV Magazine, and this one is absolutely fascinating. I wrote an article about
This is a good article.
in the upcoming issue of Green Energy Times, so if you want to see what my take on this was much more extensively than we're going to be talking about here. Anyway,
So you wrote on, it's PV Magazine here, but you also wrote on it on...
I wrote on Green Energy Times about the
about the
RMI
articles. Good, good.
thing.
Well, the headline says that staying below 2 degrees is possible and practical, says RMI. And we'll soon find out who RMI is.
Right. The latest UN emissions gap report showed that the world would still be heading for a temperature rise between 2.9 and 3.4 degrees Celsius by 2100. A report from the Rocky Mountain Institute argues that staying below 2 degrees Celsius is both practical and possible given trends in renewable energy. I think the folks at Rocky Mountain Institute, which is the source of that report, have been watching this show because we've been saying things like
We've been talking about it.
Yeah, but basically what they're saying is there are a whole bunch of trends in the marketplace, including the very well-known trend of the prices of renewable power just going down, down, down.
Which wasn't predicted to this degree.
Not to the degree it's been happening. And the price drops in batteries have been astonishing, and we're getting to a point very soon, actually in some places already, the price, you know, we were talking about solar power being at grid parity, meaning that the price of energy from solar power was at or below the price of energy from fossil fuels. But now we're
finding that it's better in places.
Not just better, but it's enough better that you can have a battery in the mix and have it's still better.
And there are alternatives to batteries.
There are indeed. I know. It's an update. It's an update of the thing that we've talked about before. Yeah. Okay, should we move on?
Well, there's a quick takeaway from the guy that wrote this article. He's got a point. Pessimism is both dangerous and wrong.
Yes.
Pessimism is dangerous because despair undercuts the will to act. And wrong because this view does not take into account events already taking place, which you just mentioned, that indicate a possible pathway to a rapid energy transfer.
And you know, the Rocky Mountain Institute did 6 scenarios, one of which was the business as usual scenario. And the business as usual scenario, their stuff came up being pretty much like what was coming from the UN and elsewhere. But they also had 5 other scenarios, and they were all below 2 degrees. And there is a reason for this that's mathematical. And the reason is that the UN, well, you remember we've talked about the Energy Information Administration and their projections always being wrong.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out, you
found out why?
Well, maybe. I'm thinking this article might explain it. The scientists who are doing these things don't use a mathematical technique which is appropriate for situations where there's an exponential change going on. And the result is their projections are always linear.
Okay.
But the projections aren't supposed to be linear.
Yeah.
They're supposed to.
We talked about that with some graphs.
Yeah, absolutely. And now the Rocky Mountain Institute is using what's called Wright's Law, which is a well-known law in this kind of situation, and saying, okay, let's look at these things using Wright's Law. Well, you can go back to 2005 and say, okay, if we're going to use Wright's Law for solar power or something like that to project its growth, and then you can use the data that was available in 2005 to project it. And what happens? By golly, it turns out that you get something that was pretty close to what happened. Now what they're saying is solar power and wind power together, both, are going, and so batteries also, are operating according to Wright's Law. We can predict that the exponential change. It's not actually fully exponential because an exponential graph would go like this, right, where this is going to go up and then eventually it'll slow down and go over. So it's an S curve. But in the low part of the S curve, which is where we are, it looks like it's exponential. And I looked at this and I thought, holy smokes, you can do the same thing in reverse. Because Wright's Law is based on the installed base of the system. You see, as the installed base gets bigger, the efficiency of manufacturing the components drops. Increases. The price drops. So think about that in terms of some other commodities like oil. as the installed base for the use of oil goes down, the price of oil is going to go up because the efficiency in producing it will go down.
We've mentioned this on the show before.
Right, but now I've got a mathematical basis for that.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, we don't have a situation where we've got one thing going like this and another thing going like that and they cross at a point. We've got a situation where one thing grows like this and the other thing falls like this. They're going to cross quicker.
Strange things are happening.
That's right. And that falling thing, that's not going to be an S-curve. It's going to come to a crash right at the bottom. We are, I think, well before 2050, we are going to be at a point where nobody is buying petroleum-based products.
At least not for vehicles.
Not for anything except for maybe tiny amounts of it for specialty purposes, but it would have to be specialty. There isn't any.
Plastics are going to be.
Why would you do that? Look, spoiler: you can make plastics out of acetic acid.
Spoiler. We'll talk about that.
We'll get
later.
to it.
Very
Okay.
interesting article.
Yeah, that's right. That article, by the way, came from PV Magazine.
Let's come a little closer to home.
Okay, this is from Solar Industry. And
Massachusetts awards solar grant to the Sheriff's Department.
And there you have,
that's
this
Franklin
beautiful
County.
picture of the Sheriff's Department. I don't know where that picture came from, but it was.
That's Greenfield, isn't it?
Yeah, right. You can tell by the mountains in the background. Okay, the Baker-Polito administration in Massachusetts has awarded a $545,000 grant to the Franklin County Sheriff's Department to support the installation of a 436 kilowatt solar canopy at the Franklin County Jail and House of Correction in Greenfield, Massachusetts.
There's a picture of it. It's a pretty big solar panel, solar array. We don't have the picture.
No, this isn't the picture. There is a picture in the article. The grant is the 7th by the Leading Example State Solar Canopy Grant Program. Now, of course, a solar canopy typically is a solar array that's over parking. Mm-hmm. It does not diminish the value of the property for parking. It doesn't create any aesthetic problem. It just
keeps the snow off the cars.
Keeps the snow off the cars. The cars can sit in the sun and not bake because the sun isn't on them.
Well,
they're in the shade.
The Southwest, that's important.
It is important. Yeah. Okay. Should we move
There's
on?
a quick takeaway here. This is about Massachusetts.
Yep.
It's a national leader in solar energy with over 70,000 completed solar projects statewide.
Yeah.
And the other one is this particular project includes 2 electric vehicle charging stations.
Yes.
As well as pre-wiring for an additional 3.
Right.
So they're looking ahead.
Yeah.
They're going to need more than 3.
Oh yes, absolutely. But you start someplace.
So
okay, we are up to Sunday, August 20th.
Okay.
And we've got
I don't need that picture anymore, so I'll bring you up.
Oh, okay. This is an item from Clean Technic. I'm sorry. Reading the wrong thing here. It's from Politico.
More GOP I can't even say it. More GOP lawmakers bucking their party on climate change.
While President Donald Trump continues to dismantle Obama-era climate policies, an unlikely surge of Republican lawmakers has begun distancing themselves from the GOP's hardline on climate change. The House Climate Solutions Caucus, a bipartisan backwater when it was formed early last year, has more than tripled in size since January.
Takeaway here is people are getting more and more uncomfortable with the nuttiness of Trump's positions. Republicans fought to keep language declaring climate change is a direct threat to the national security of the United States. They fought to keep that out. Mm-hmm. Okay, so, and these guys, the 46 Republicans that joined the Democrats, are all in areas where they might have competition in the next election.
Right.
So they're listening to the people.
This caucus that we're talking about, the House Climate Solutions Caucus, is a little unusual because in order for a Democrat to join it, he's got to find a Republican who will also join it, so that they have equality between Republicans and Democrats.
Interesting concept.
Yes. Okay. Should we move on?
Yeah, let's move on
we
to something very timely here.
Yeah, we have an item from etenergyworld.com.
It's a nice picture.
Yeah, when I mentioned this particular organization, I always mention that I think, and I don't know, that it's actually based in India. But they certainly have people who write in ways that are like the ways Americans write. And they write about...
I think you're right. I think it is Indian. I think they got American writers.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
might.
But India's getting to be a pretty sophisticated country. I mean, it always has been.
It always
But,
has been, yeah.
We're seeing it now because they're feeling their own muscles.
Yeah, and we've trained a lot of Indian scientists very well, and they went back to
They
India.
went back. Well, not, a lot of them.
And of
stayed
course,
here, too.
Donald Trump will send them out of the United States and back to India just to get rid of them, which is kind of like, you know, there was who was it? The Spanish, when they found all that gold and silver in the New World. What did they do? They decided that no real gentleman would work for a living, and let's kick out all the Jews and Muslims. And the result of that was that they had a society that was ruled by people who were ignorant.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Well, this picture here is the recent eclipse that we just saw.
Yep.
And
No, this isn't a recent eclipse. This is an
This is
eclipse
an
in
earlier
2012.
eclipse, but it's an eclipse.
It's an earlier recent eclipse.
Well, the article's about our recent solar eclipse.
It sure is.
Because it says, and I quote, "Solar eclipse presents the first major test of the power grid in a renewable era."
Yeah, and I've been seeing so
this is
many articles
interesting.
about this. As Monday's solar eclipse sweeps from Oregon to South Carolina, U.S. electric power and grid operators will be glued to their monitoring stations in what may represent the biggest test yet of the renewable energy era. Utilities and grid operators have been planning for the event for years and have lined up standby power sources. Now, I think we should
Explain
do.
what's going on.
Yeah, the eclipse, having the eclipse meant that this huge amount of solar power they had in California in particular,
Yeah.
not suddenly, because it over a period of an hour or so just went offline. It stopped
offline,
producing.
it disappeared.
Stopped producing. So of course the
And then
question
came
is,
back on again.
yeah, the question is, what do you do about power
There
during?
was a significant amount of power.
Yeah, and it did not cause problems according to the initial reports. And then today I found the first article about a big problem that resulted.
Oh, yeah?
And the big problem that resulted in California was that the people of the time didn't want to be inside and running air conditioners, and they'd been told, you know, don't use power during this because the power won't come from the sunshine. They shut their air conditioners off by the millions and went outside to watch the eclipse.
Okay, so nobody anticipated
Nobody
that.
anticipated that, and meanwhile the utilities were ramping up alternate power sources that
Mostly hydro.
mostly hydro, but the result was that the eclipse and the power outage generated because of a loss of solar power produced a situation where there was so much more power than there was demand for it that the price of electricity on the spot market went negative. What can you say?
You can't plan for everything.
No, you can't. Well, you could, but they didn't factor human activities into the mix. So
The next article coming up is kind of interesting.
which
Clean Technica.
Clean Technica, I've lost it again. Oh, here we go. Clean Technica said this.
Solar plants are cropping up on farms, and they are.
They are. Increasingly, solar companies work with farmers to install solar panels on their land. In North Carolina, solar companies pay rents of up to $1,400 per acre, far more than most farmers could earn from planting crops or raising livestock. But PV arrays are low impact, so the farmers can raise livestock or grow crops on land covered with PVs.
This is going to be big.
Yeah.
This is going to be big. Farmers are going to adapt.
Yes, they are.
Because this is instant funds. You know.
Yes.
This is money coming in.
Well, it's like the wind turbines, where in Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas, mostly
All
in
of a sudden
Texas,
there's wind turbines.
these farmers had
They
always.
blow the heck out of the cows, don't they?
Yeah, the farmers always had oil pumps. Well, the oil pumps went dry, so they didn't get income from their oil pumps anymore, and they were, looking out and saying, "What are we going to do?" And it occurred to many of them, put in wind turbines. So they've put in thousands and thousands of wind turbines. And you know, the example that I always use is the Roscoe, Texas, where they put in 863, I think it was 863, 683 wind turbines in the area of Roscoe, Texas.
Yeah, we talked about that.
And the people in the area love them. They think they're wonderful.
Didn't you talk to somebody down there?
I talked to a woman and I said, you know, how do you feel about living in a wind farm? And she said, well, I never thought about the fact that we live in a wind farm. I suppose we do. Well, we like it.
Here's a quick takeaway here. In some places, solar arrays have proved more lucrative to farmers than cash crops.
Yep.
Farmers can help keep solar arrays online. A Texas firm contracted a breeder to deploy dozens of sheep to mow the grass at installation near San Antonio.
What do you get raise sheep for? To mow grass.
The panels generate power and provide shade to the sheep, and the sheep keep the grass from growing so tall it obscures the panel.
Yep.
And it also mentions that sheep are particularly well suited to this task because unlike ghosts, they won't chew on cables or climb on top of the panel.
That's right. You don't want goats in your...
And you've seen that on Western Avenue.
Yeah, and cows do funny things too. I used to watch cows tear down barbed wire fences that were not secured well enough.
Oh yeah. Wow.
This reminds me a little bit about raising strawberries.
Oh.
They would have a tractor trailer pull up to the strawberry yard and just open the doors, and out come hundreds of geese.
Geese, huh?
Yeah. What do? Eat the weeds. They're not interested in the strawberries.
You know what? That's interesting. Yeah, somebody was thinking on that.
Why would you spend money on these weed killers from Monsanto when you can raise geese?
Get geese, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, on Monday, August 21st,
Yep.
we have a picture.
And it comes from Renew Economy. And there it is.
And there it is.
There it is. That's a weird picture.
It really is.
Yeah. What's the title?
Why solar towers and storage plants will reshape energy markets.
The 150 megawatt solar tower and molten salt storage plant to be built in Port Augusta, Port Augusta's in Australia, has been made possible through groundbreaking pricing and contract structure that could help completely reshape Australian power markets, including the end of baseload power as we know it.
That's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
You got to read the article.
You have to read the article. We really can't explain what's going on here. I can explain what that tower is all about. That's technology. But what they're saying is that they have this concept of
storing the heat from this tower.
Yeah, that's
and using it off.
But they also have a business plan that that is remarkable.
It's pretty complicated.
It's pretty complicated, but for a person who's interested in business plans, it's worthwhile to look at. The way this tower works, and that particular tower, by the way, is in the United States.
Oh, is it?
That thing on the top that looks like
That's in the U.S.?
Glowing, yep.
Oh.
That thing on the top that looks like it's glowing.
It is glowing.
Is glowing. Those panels that look like they're solar panels.
You can see the backs of the panels. Yep.
Yeah, those are not solar panels.
They're mirrors.
They're mirrors, and they're putting the sunlight on that thing and making it super hot. Well,
so what you're seeing there is sunlight on that top of that.
That's
tower.
right, and the sunlight heats it up. Inside is salt, which is melted. It becomes molten, and it's run into a storage area that is, as I recall, underground through highly insulated pipes.
So they save all that heat.
They save the heat, and then at night you can deliver energy from that solar power for hours.
That's called dispatchable.
It's called
Turn it
dispatchable.
on when you want it.
That's right. That's right. So,
well, coal's big weakness, this is a takeaway, apart from the fact that it's dirty and dangerous, is that it can't readily be turned off.
same problem with nuclear.
And that's what they're talking about, baseload power.
That's right. And it's the same problem with a lot of gas plants. These big thermal plants, you can't turn them down.
You can't turn them down. They gotta be running.
So you've got to use that electricity that's coming out of there, whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
And the way that they do that is they have those plants running at a low price through the 24 hours a
24/7.
day, and then when there's a demand, they turn
They
on
ramp them up.
more expensive plants.
Yep.
And that more expensive power is
It can be
expensive.
very expensive.
And solar power happens to come on at just the moment in the day when the demand increases. So, anyway, should we move on there?
Yeah, this one is coming along.
Yeah, it's from echobusiness.com.
Leading scientists and lawyers challenge Trump on the social cost of carbon.
The Trump administration has decided to withdraw the official estimate of the social cost of carbon and disband the interagency working group that developed it. Despite this, a group of prominent economists and lawyers have highlighted the metric's continued validity for policymaking in a letter published in the journal Science. Now, Science obviously is a peer-reviewed publication, so this is an interesting.
Well, Trump doesn't want people talking about that.
Well, you know, this is
Social costs are real.
they are real, and you know, I've been working on an article that I want to publish on Clean Technica about the First Amendment. And this is freedom of speech. And you know, there's a limitation on the First Amendment. You can't stand up in a crowded theater and yell fire.
Unless there really is
Unless
a fire.
there really is a fire. But just imagine this for a minute. What would happen if you were in the middle of a crowded theater, 6 rows back from the front, right in the middle, 14 people in either direction to the aisles, great seat, and there's a rock group going on, they have a fire show, and all of a sudden the curtains catch fire. Well, you'd want to get out,
I think.
But the manager jumps up on the stage and he says, wait a minute, everybody, don't worry about this. The curtains catching fire is all part of the show.
Aha. Now,
And by the way, the firemen are going to arrive, and they're all part of the show. And when the fire marshal gets on the stage and says, get out of here, that's for your entertainment. It's part of the show. All right, what would you do with a guy like that? Freedom of speech? He doesn't have the right to do that.
No, he doesn't.
And that's what our administration is doing. They're saying, don't pay attention to the people who know anything.
Forget about the guy behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't pay attention to the scientists. We know better because we're politically correct. Oh, they don't use the term politically correct, do you? We are followers of Ayn Rand. Okay. Should we pass on?
I think so. But
Okay.
the bottom line is that there is a social cost of carbon.
There is a
and
social.
everybody's paying for it.
Everybody's paying for it, and in Vermont, it's probably about $1,000 per person per year. Okay.
Okay.
All right. We have
We got another image coming up.
an image.
Bingo.
This
There it is.
image is really interesting
Hey,
to me
why
in
did I
a
bring it
weird
up?
kind
There
of
it
way.
is.
Why don't you put that
There
up?
we go.
The thing I find interesting about that particular image is those 3 guys up in the upper left-hand corner.
Leaning backwards.
They're all leaning backwards. Why? I don't know.
I caught that too.
Maybe there's a stiff wind coming from behind
I
them.
caught that too. I said, that's a little bit.
Okay,
bizarre.
this comes from Yahoo Finance UK.
Yahoo.
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 Yahoo. Sorry.
Large-scale grid batteries will soon be a cheaper alternative to building natural gas plants. Now, who'd have thought?
Who'd have thought? They've been watching our show. According to the University of Minnesota's Energy Transition Lab, starting in 2019, the overall cost of building grid-scale storage there will be less, and there is in Minnesota, will be less than that of building natural gas plants to meet future energy demand in that state. Current plans for adding 1,800 megawatts of gas-fired peaker plants by 2028 may prove to be unnecessary.
Well, this again is part of what's going on. These batteries are getting better and cheaper.
Better and
So
cheaper.
all of a sudden they're affordable where a year ago they were unthinkable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The price of these things is going down like the price of solar panels. And
It's following almost the same curve. I don't think anybody predicted that either.
I certainly didn't know about it until about 6 months ago, or maybe, I don't know, plus or minus a year. Maybe I'll find out in the future. But anyway.
Well, we could talk about those batteries, but I think we'll move on.
All right.
Tuesday, August 22nd.
Thank you so much. I was about to say that. We've got an item from EchoWatch and a new picture. This picture is fascinating.
This is an excellent idea.
Yeah, it is.
And the headline is, the world's biggest floating solar farm goes live on top of a former coal mine. So the coal mine was there, they used up all the coal, it flooded naturally, all of a sudden they got a lake.
Full of toxic water, by the way.
Yeah, and look what they did with it.
Yeah. A new floating solar farm went live in the Chinese city of Huainan, and I can't pronounce Chinese at all, so if you're Chinese, please forgive me. Above a retired coal mine, China Daily reported. The mine had been flooded from groundwater after it went out of service. The new solar farm generates 40 megawatts. This is a big solar farm, which can power about 15,000 homes. And it is the second biggest active floating solar farm, has a capacity of 6.3. So this is 40 megawatts, and the second biggest is 6.3.
Almost 7 times, huh?
Yeah, but the thing that's interesting there, what you're looking at there is an image, and you can't really see the distance very well because of the haze that's produced by the evaporation of the water. But this is an image of an open pit coal mine that's probably miles long. And
it was a big mine.
It's a big mine, and they put in this solar array in the mine. The mine had no use. I mean, it was
just a big hole in the ground.
It was a big hole in the ground
filled with water.
Polluted water. The water was polluted because of materials that had leached out of that coal mine. And so you've got basically an ecological wreck there. There are undoubtedly problems with a thing like this. I would imagine that aquatic birds would land in that. I don't think they'd stick around very long because there's probably no fish in that.
I wouldn't imagine. How are they going to get there?
I don't know. Well, you know, fish. There's mysteries about the motion of fish. There really is, because if you think about it, there's trout in Maine. There's trout in New Hampshire, Connecticut River Valley, the Hudson River Valley, going out to the Midwest. Same trout. How do they get from one of those rivers to another? Because they can't do it going through the sea. They can't deal with this with the salt. But I've heard that
eagles,
aquatic birds land, and the trout's eggs get stuck on their feathers.
Oh, okay.
And then they're shielded by the feathers and retain their moisture while they're carried from that little body of water to the next one over.
Okay,
you know,
that's sensible.
Given thousands of years, you can move them. Okay.
Interesting sub-story here about floating solar farms. They have numerous advantages.
Yeah.
They don't take up space on land, duh.
Yeah.
The solar panels are more effective because the water cools them down. We've talked about that on the show.
Right.
And they can increase the amount of available drinking or irrigation water by limiting evaporation. So you got a couple of second-order consequences there that are quite favorable.
Right. Okay, should we move on? I see that we've got a lot of stuff to cover. And our next item is from SF Gate, which is San Francisco Gate.
California power grid survives solar eclipse unscathed. Well, we just talked about that.
We just did, and I think we should go on because I want to make sure we get everything in. So our next item is the one that you liked so much. Let's just go to that.
I'm going to get this picture up too. This is an amazing thing.
This is from Seeker.
What you're looking at there is a specialized train that does nothing but going up and downhill all day. Rail energy storage harnesses the power of gravity all the livelong day.
Advanced rail energy storage based in California has a solution to the problem of energy storage. It is to run some old trains up and down a hill. When a wind or solar farm is producing excess energy, the repurposed electric locomotives haul enormously heavy railroad cars to the top of a hill. When the power is needed, they generate it coming down. And you know, Tom, let me ask you a question. I don't know how steep these rail lines can be to get traction. But it seems to me that you could do that in Vermont on the hills that we've got.
I think you could do it easily.
Okay, if you do that,
that are doing that.
if you do that, that means that there would be rail lines going over the hills, which would be east-west rail
And
lines.
there aren't very many.
And there aren't any. So we could add those rail lines and possibly actually have passenger trains on the same lines.
You mean between Bennington and Brattleboro?
Exactly. That would be a really good example.
It would be, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, we should, if unless you have
Well,
something to say.
we got 10 minutes left. We're almost on Wednesday.
Oh yes, indeed, you're right.
Yeah, we're doing
Okay,
okay.
let's not worry about it.
What goes up must come down.
Yes.
That's from the article. This principle applies to most things in our current gravitational setup, and it could provide a significant boost to green energy initiatives too. The concept is similar to regenerative braking used in electric and hybrid vehicles.
Yep.
System is also similar to existing pumped hydro
Yes.
that essentially does the same thing with water.
Yes.
Okay?
That's right.
Pumping water uphill and capturing it downhill. And it's cheaper too. It turns out that this rail energy solution costs about half as much as competing energy storage solutions. Well, batteries are getting down there, but I mean...
Batteries are getting down there. But in a lot of places, this would be a perfect solution.
Pushing rocks uphill might seem like a curiously low-tech approach to energy storage, but this very simplicity is what gives rail energy storage an edge. Building a railroad loop is a lot simpler than maintaining a battery farm. And the system can easily use repurposed locomotives and rail cars, and that's what they've done.
That's what they've done here. These don't look like repurposed locomotives, but I'm willing to believe.
They took the tops off.
They
and
took
then
the tops
basically
off,
That's
yeah.
what they're looking at there.
Yep. And, as I said, if you had these lines in, well, I think a lot of people are going to wonder, what good is this? And if you think about it, if you're going to run a rail car full of rocks up to the top of a mountain, that's going to cost money for the electricity. But what if the electricity happens to have a cost that is zero or below zero? You could actually make money.
You mean like you could use the hill in Searsburg and the wind farm in Searsburg together?
Yes.
Bingo.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So you take the Searsburg station, and when it's producing electricity, too much of it, instead of shutting the wind turbines down, which is what they would do now, you put that electricity on the grid and you use it to power these things up to the tops of the hills. Now you've got a bunch of rocks at the top of a hill on a train, and if you just let those things go back down to the bottom of the,
Bingo,
you can gather electricity as you want. But the trains can be just stored at the top of the mountain until you need them.
Yeah.
So you can use free power to get them there, and then power that.
They're waiting for you when you need them.
And when the power hits 60 cents per kilowatt hour or something, you run it back down, make a lot of money. You could actually make money in both directions.
You probably could. Well, another thing about this is rail energy storage has about an 80% efficiency rate.
Which is extremely high for
That's
storage.
high, because pump storage is 60%.
Yeah, very high.
Batteries are a little bit better, but their capacity degrades over time.
Right.
So this is an idea whose time has come, and of course it's patented in about every country in the world.
I got news for you. In a lot of places, you can patent things just because nobody's patented it before.
That's what's
You don't
happening,
have to
yeah.
be the first person to think of it.
that's what's happening.
In Australia, I've read there is not only a person who has patented the wheel, but there is even a guy who has patented the use of air for breathing.
Wow.
Amazing, isn't it? Okay.
Well, we're up to the last day here.
We are. This is August 23rd.
August 23rd.
We have an item from Think Progress. Energy
Department doesn't issue emergency order to boost coal that would have allowed power plants to flout environmental rules. That's the fact that they didn't issue the order is what the headline's about.
Coal executives say Donald Trump pledged to enact emergency order to protect coal-fired power plants, but his DOE has decided not to use that authority to give temporary relief to the plants. This type of order is intended to protect the nation's electric supply and temporarily allows plants to skirt environmental regulations. But you know that he has made a bunch of people in the Appalachian area, including probably Mitch McConnell, really angry.
That's
and
what this article's about.
He's got a feud going on.
He's backed out of his promise.
He has. Okay, I want to just keep going here because I want to put some time in on this.
Well, we got. Why don't we skip one and then we
get back to it?
Get back to it.
Okay.
So
The-
this one won't take too long.
The utility dive article that we have here.
Northern Pass Transmission Project, which is over here in New Hampshire,
Yep.
gets the DOA environmental nod.
The U.S. DOE issued a final environmental impact statement for the Northern Pass Transmission Project. It concluded that the hydroelectric system is the preferred alternative and will result in minimal impacts. Northern Pass Transmission is developing a 192-mile transmission line to move power from Canada to a substation in Deerfield, New Hampshire.
Well, there's a lot of power in Canada, and there's a lot of people in southern New England that want some of that power.
Like Boston,
Like Boston,
Providence,
like
New Haven, you know, all over the place.
How do they get it down there? And there are multiple schemes right now going in.
A whole bunch.
And some of them, well, what?
Some go through New Hampshire, some go through Vermont, some go out to sea.
Go underneath Lake Champlain.
That's right.
And you're right, there's one that goes out to sea.
Yeah. Let's look at our next item. This one is mind-boggling. It's so crazy.
Okay, we got a picture.
This is our last item. This is
Get the
on
picture up.
August 23rd, and this is a weird,
Well,
weird
we got
picture.
4 minutes to talk about it.
Yeah,
so
we
let's
do.
start talking.
Let's do it.
Cyborg, in quotes, bacteria deliver green fuel source from sunlight.
This is from the
This is
BBC. Scientists have found that some bacteria have a natural defense to cadmium, mercury, and lead that lets them turn the heavy metal into a sulfide, which the bacteria express as tiny crystals on their surfaces. These turn out to be semiconductors that the bacteria can use to photosynthesize atmospheric carbon dioxide into acetic acid, which is a chemical feedstock. We had that
Tiny
spoiler.
solar panels.
These things are in fact tiny solar panels. Now, if you've
And
ever,
and when they, instead of generating electricity, they're generating acetic acid,
that's right.
which is vinegar.
Well,
Sort of.
it's what makes vinegar smell. But the thing is, have you ever heard of a product called acetate?
Yeah.
It's a type
Where
of
does it come
plastic.
from, huh?
It comes. It's a polymer made from acetic acid. These bacteria are so small. You know, if you think about it, there are organisms called stentors, which are single cell organisms, and they're almost 1/8 of an inch long. I've actually seen them from locally gathered water.
Okay.
Okay, they're kind of funnel shaped, and they have algae, single celled algae that they kind of gobble down that live inside their funnel. Not
Okay.
inside the cell, just inside the funnel, and there's a
symbiotic
symbiotic
thing going, yeah.
relationship going. If you look at the small single-celled algae or protozoa in a microscope, you can get a lot of detail out of them. But bacteria at that kind of level they're just specks. They're so small.
Yeah.
They are just specks. They're absolutely tiny. And
Even
so
in a microscope.
even in a microscope, they're just tiny. But they get on them these even tinier solar cells. And they are using sunlight from these solar cells, which they built as a defense against cadmium. But having built those things as a defense against cadmium, they can get power from them. And they use that power to take carbon dioxide and water and turn them into acetic acid.
Which can be turned into a fuel, can be turned into plastics, can be turned into a lot of
All kinds of things.
Yes.
And if you made it pure enough, you could even mix it with oil and put it on your salad.
Well, real quick one here. This approach really only needs large vats of liquid to be kept out of the sun.
Yeah.
The bacteria are self-replicating and self-regenerating. It's a low-waste technology.
Yeah.
This is something that's going to be happening.
I suspect that it will be. And one of the things that I think people should understand about this thing is these are not GMO bacteria.
No, they're natural.
They're natural bacteria. The scientists just didn't know that they did this naturally. And they do.
So it's kind of like an accident.
They found these things by an accident.
They weren't looking for them.
No.
And all of a sudden somebody said, hey, this is interesting. Come on over and see what's going on.
Yeah. Were you the one who was saying that the most exciting thing to hear a scientist say is not eureka, but it's something like, that's strange?
I didn't say that, but it's a good one.
Somebody just
Better than oops.
Yeah, right. It's better than oops. I've known scientists who did oops. I knew a girl who in a high school science class accidentally spilled silver nitrate on her face.
Wow.
And you know,
Well,
but
we're about out of here.
we're about out of here,
over.
and it's about time to say goodbye. And I hope you people have an absolutely delightful week. I'm going to put this thing up.
12
There we go.
seconds
Have
left.
a perfectly lovely week.
Still